here with Dr. Kaitlynn Mendes. She is the Canada Research Chair in Inequality and Gender at Western University and the principal investigator on the research project DIY Digital Safety. She's got over a decade of experience researching young people's use of digital technologies in their lives. And Kaitlynn, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
And we have been following your research here at MediaSmarts for many years. And I'd love for you to just tell our listeners a little bit about the kinds of online harms that young people are most commonly experiencing today based on that research. And in particular, if there's any that you find adults tend to underestimate or maybe misunderstand.
A great question. Okay, so part of it is like the typical harms. The truth is that we found such a wide range of harm and that there isn't actually a typical. A lot of it really depends on things like your age and your gender and where you're based. So it's hard to kind of say, like, this is the harm that's most likely to impact most young people, because again, it really depends on who you are. But if I can kind of say for girls, we often see them getting sent unwanted intimate images, often from like older men. So if I can say things like the dick pic. But also boys and young men also report receiving a lot of unwanted images in the form of like porn bots and like getting sent links to porn chats. So we definitely see that. We also see pressure to send images, particularly for girls. We see a lot of mean and nasty comments, bullying, harassment. Boys talked a lot about this, especially in gaming spaces, whereas girls talk about seeing this on social media platforms. And then we're seeing the rise of more kind of like newer harms, things like sextortion, so financial extortion that's often linked with having an intimate image. But again, these look different, or it looks different depending on gender. So for example, for girls, this often happens in the context of intimate like relationships where there's grooming involved. And so for girls, the extorter doesn't usually want money. They want more images, or they want sexual favors, or they want to stop the girl from leaving the relationship. Whereas for boys, really, this is a financial scam. So money is kind of the main thing. And if you're kind of queer and non-binary, it's often used as a form of bullying or harassment or outing.
Yeah, and I think we've been seeing stories in the news of some pretty high profile sextortion cases. I am curious if you could tell us, what you know about the rate of how often these kinds of things are happening. Because I know, obviously it's something that parents are very concerned about.
Yeah. So definitely for things like sextortion, it's actually really difficult because there's a lot of shame around it. We just did a survey with Canadian teens, and we found that the overall percentage wasn't that high of successful sextortion, but there were a lot of attempted sextortion, particularly for young boys. So we weren't really able to capture like how many of them had attempts, but they spoke a lot about this in the research that we've done. So in the survey and also in the focus groups, where they said someone tried to catfish me. So this is the language that teens will often use. So catfishing is where someone goes online, they create an online profile where they pretend to be someone else. So in this case, it's usually men who are creating these profiles where they pretend as though they're teenage girls, and they're using that to create contact with these teenage boys for the purpose of trying to get the boys to send them sexual images so that they can sextort them. So we had lots of incidences of that. But pressure to send intimate images is very common. Same thing like harassment, having your intimate images shared without your consent. Again, these are things that are quite common. Things that we're hearing in the news around like deep fake nude images, or maybe you've heard even recently in the news, we've heard about grok, which is undressing. So even if it's not necessarily making people naked, but undressing, we didn't see like quite as high numbers for those happening to people, or people didn't admit that it was happening to them, but many people knew that it was happening to someone else. So there was lots of reports of like, yeah, it didn't happen to me, but it happened to someone in my school or someone in my peer group. So we know that, the use of AI and kind of like these nudifying apps. So there are actual apps like Grok that you can use to either nudify or undress someone, that these are like accessible, they're popular, they're free, they're very easy to use. You need no tech skills. So if you have kind of some sexual curiosity, or if you're interested in harming someone by embarrassing them, humiliating them, by kind of nudifying them, it's unfortunately really easy to do.
Yeah, and there's quite a wide range of the different harms and how different audiences, experience them. And so I know there's no kind of one blanket solution, but I also know you
Mm.
have a great new guide from DIY Digital Safety called Why Don't Teens Report Digital Harms to Adults? And What Can We Do to Make Them More Likely to? Which I think is a great title. And are there a few takeaways that you could share from that guide? If you're a parent or another trusted adult and you're worried about some of these, very real, potential harms for teens, what are some of your kind of top takeaways?
Yeah, I think there's like three key things that we found. So one is that there's a huge amount of embarrassment and shame. So young people feel very deeply embarrassed to go to adults, often because they've done things that their parents have told them explicitly not to do. Like, don't ever take a nude picture of yourself. Don't ever send a nude picture of yourself to someone else. Or don't ever add a stranger. But unfortunately, or fortunately, like these are things that young people are doing. Digital technologies are playing an increasing role in our intimate relationships. And so, young people are using cameras, they're sexting with each other. This is part of their relationships. But if they're doing these things that their parents told them not to do, they're less likely to go to the parents. So one of the things we say is that parents need to stop passing on these messages. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have conversations. It doesn't mean that, we can't talk about like how can we do this safely or in ways that maybe protect yourself. Let's talk about what the person's going to do with the image. Are you actually ready to send the image? Is there consent? All of these things need to be done, but that's a key thing. So we also recommend that parents also have information about other helplines. So I have 3 children myself, and I always say to my kids, I hope you come and talk to me about things, but if ever you feel as though you're too embarrassed or you can't, the phone number for the kids help phone line is up on our whiteboard in our laundry room. So it's an anonymous source where you can go and talk to someone. And the other thing about those helplines that are really great is they provide that judgment free response. And so that's the other thing teens tell parents, is that they're fearful of being judged. So those are like some really important things. And then the final thing is that young people are really scared that the first response is that parents are going to take their devices away. And I'm not saying it's never appropriate to put limits or boundaries or to kind of remove devices, but simply removing that device often doesn't solve the underlying issue. All it really does is kind of tells that young person that, my parent isn't a trusted person and I'm not going to tell them the next time something happens. And I would definitely say if you are going to take a device away, it's best if that's agreed upon earlier. So, when you're first like giving your child a phone, if you talk about the boundaries and you talk about consequences for if things go wrong, like if I find out you've been bullying someone or sharing someone else's images non-consensually, there are going to be consequences to this. One of which might be taking a phone away. But again, just taking that device away without conversations, without addressing like maybe the harm that was caused or the hurt or kind of your child's needs, that doesn't actually solve the problem.
Often at MediaSmarts, we say one of those important rules or important things to say when you give a kid a device or allow them onto social media is to say one of the rules is that if they have a problem, that they come to you with it, and to not be afraid that they're going to have negative consequences by doing that. But I love your idea as well of having other options, because kids don't always want to come to their parents or don't feel like they can for whatever reason. So having the kids help phone or other trusted adults, right, that they know that they can turn to is super important.
The other thing that we've heard that I really loved is this idea of like an amnesty policy. So, okay, we have like certain rules, but like if ever there's something, something has happened to you and you're really upset, like we agree that you can come talk to me and I'm not going to take the device away. So kind of having those like agreements, like if you think that the most important thing is for your child to turn to you for help rather than trying to deal with it on their own, or maybe going to other people who may not know what to do, you can also set some of those limits in place. And that was an idea that a teen had told us about that they had with their parents, and we thought that was a really great idea.
Yeah, it's like a promise, like, "I won't freak out if you come to me and
Exactly,
tell me about
exactly.
this." Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And it brings me sort of to my next topic and my next question, which is around the, proposed, age-based social media bans. So Australia already has one for under 16. They were the first to do so, and now here in Canada, there's one being proposed for, youth under 14. I'd love to hear a little bit around your reaction to these approaches based on what we know from research.
Well, it's not just me. There's many experts who work with children, who study children, who are all very skeptical of these bans. And the first thing is that there is actually no evidence that they work. What we're seeing, and Australia is going to soon be publishing some information from what's happening there. But we know, for example, that young people are moving to other platforms that aren't included in the ban because the ban's only included major platforms. We also know that all the platforms don't work the same. So does a blanket ban kind of make sense? And I think there's a lot of concern is that tech, and this is one thing we say at DIY, is that tech can be great. Tech can be really important. And so what are we kind of like trading off if we're just banning this tech? And then finally, simply banning social media doesn't actually solve the underlying issues, which is that these platforms are designed in ways to be highly addictive, that their algorithms are designed in ways that promote content that can be really problematic, that we don't have education, we don't have training, there aren't enough resources to help children who are impacted by these harms. So really by like having this ban and say, well, you can't go online until you're 14 or 15 or 16 or 18, it doesn't stop the harm from happening. It just delays it. And so we think that actually like addressing those harms, for me, I think we need to be regulating the social media companies, because by introducing those bans, it's letting those companies off the hook. It's saying you can continue to operate in ways that are not in our children's best interest, that we know are causing harm. And the responsibility on the onus is on the children or the parents to keep the children off of the devices. And so we need to be flipping the script and say, no, tech company, you need to be responsible. You need to have safety by design. You need to have children's and all of our well-being at heart. And I think that is really what we need to be doing. And again, until we have evidence that shows that these social media bans are helping, I don't think that other countries should simply rush to introduce them. I think that there's other places we can spend our time and our resources.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see, right, from Australia, their results so far and how that's been working. I know we've been following it quite closely, and we also know that teens are able to get around things very easily,
They're
right?
so good at it. There was
Yeah.
a study that I did in the UK. I did this similar research. I used to live there, and we did a survey with teens, and we found that 40% of teens knew how to bypass like all the filters and controls that their parents put on their devices. So we have to remember as parents or as adults that teens are way more motivated to find ways around these bans than governments are, or tech companies are, or many parents are, to kind of make sure that they're being enforced. And teens were very open at telling us about all the ways that they know how to bypass parental filters and controls. And again, in Australia, we're seeing it. They're moving to smaller platforms. They're using an older sibling's account. Like, they are clever. They are going to find ways of getting onto this tech.
And do you see any other kind of risks or unintended possible consequences with some of these age-based bans? And I'm thinking, particularly of youth who rely on these spaces, right, for
Yeah.
connection and identity and
Yeah.
support.
That's such a great point, because we know, particularly for marginalized groups, so if you live in like a small rural town, maybe you're queer, maybe there's something about you that you rely on the communities that you've found through digital spaces, and now all of a sudden those are being taken away from you. Or if you don't get things like comprehensive sex education, people are finding out useful information or just about what's going on in the world. So I can definitely see, and I've written books about the benefits of tech. So, like at our project, we talk a lot about the harms, but we also know that tech can play such an important role in people's lives, and it brings many benefits. And so we don't want to just stop that. We want to keep the tech, we want to keep the good things, and we want to reduce or eliminate the harm as much as possible, or provide better supports for when young people encounter harm. And we want accountability. Right now, tech companies have no liability, no accountability for the kind of content that's on their platform, for the way that the platforms are being designed. And I think that that's really problematic. And I would like to see changes to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk as well about that age, right? Because Australia is saying 16, Canada's saying 14. Every kid is different, right? And so, at what the question we often get at Media Smarts from parents is, how old should my kid be when they get a cell phone, or how old should they be when they when they go on social media. Like what, so yeah, what are your thoughts on this
Oh,
age, like this number that, sometimes
that's like
feels arbitrary, right?
it's totally arbitrary. I mean, okay, not entirely arbitrary, but in often cases, like what is the age? You're right. Children develop at different rates. Children have different levels of emotional maturity, of self-regulation. There's lots of different things that vary very much by the child. But if we think about the age, so 13 is the age in which they're not supposed to be on social media until they're 13. That age was chosen not because of some idea that, like, at 13, children are ready to go on social media. That was actually guided by a policy decision about privacy. So, at what age are these tech companies allowed to collect data about users without parental consent? And it was agreed that 13 was the minimum age. So, many people think, okay, well, it's fine if they wait till they're 13. You're right. We're seeing talks about 14, wait to the eighth. So, often, like, wait till they're in the eighth grade, which is around when they're 14. Some countries say it's 16. We don't have enough evidence. Now, there is some research that shows that when teens are in early adolescence, that's where the risks are greatest. So, kind of the longer you can delay, it can help with things like attention span, with things like self esteem. There are some benefits, but again, I think we just don't have enough data. We don't have enough research to know exactly what is the right age. And so I get asked this question a lot with parents. And I always say there is no right age because, again, what is the point of, or what is the purpose of tech in your child's life? If for you having tech helps them be creative and that's something that you really value in your child's development, then I think that that's like a great thing. So think about how tech aligns with what you want for your child. Don't think of your child just now, like whatever age they are. Think about them in 10 years and 20 years. Like, what kind of skills, what kind of competencies, what kinds of experiences do you want the child to have? And does giving them access to that game, that app, that device help them get there? If you think that it does, then I think it can be really reasonable to give them access to tech. If you're not sure, or if you think that the harms outweigh, at the age and stage and developmental phase, then I think that's also great. So it also means parents need to know their kids. I have 3 boys, they're very different. And I think sometimes parents feel as though we have to have blanket rules that apply to all of our children equally. And I actually disagree with that. And so we don't parent our children that way in our house. And again, I do think it really comes down to, parental choice. And some families are like split families. So, maybe the phone is actually a really important communication device. So I think that tech can play very different roles. And so I think parents need to just think about, how can having the phone, how can having the social media app or that particular app, how is it helping your child develop those competency, skills, and experiences?
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for commenting on that. And, no matter what age a teen is, whether they're 13, 14, 16, I think everyone could agree that the spaces need to be safer, right? And so, are there some specific things that you would like to see platforms do better on in terms of online safety?
There's so many things. I think, and we are actually seeing platforms moving this direction. So the idea of like privacy by design. So when you know that someone is under the age of 18 and they're signing up to your platform, making all the privacy settings kind of the strictest to start. So by default, I think that that is incredibly important. Platforms need to have better reporting tools so that when people are encountering an abusive person or content that they find troubling, that they can report it and know that the tech companies are going to take it seriously. And unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen tech companies disinvest in their trust and safety teams, or they're leaving it to the community to moderate. And that is not the direction we need to be going. It's often in the name of freedom of speech, but I think really it's just another way that tech companies are not being accountable for the kinds of content that's there. So having those reporting tools, because the truth is, young people are much more likely to use those reporting tools than they are to like talk to a parent or like engage with law enforcement. So just knowing that the tech company will deal with a complaint or an issue when you raise it, if you're being harassed, if you're seeing content that was illegal or like very problematic or very troubling, I think that that would be really great. So, having that kind of accountability, investing more in moderators, having more robust policies, I think is important. We also know that a lot of the harm is fueled by the algorithms. So it's the design. And unfortunately, tech companies don't release information about those algorithms. I think that there should be some transparency. I think they should be giving researchers access to some of that data. These tech companies also collect a huge amount of data on participants. So they know how many users are under the age of 13 or under the age of 18. And so in places like the UK, actually, they are being forced to share some of that data with researchers. And in the UK, they are also forced to publish transparency reports. So they talk about how many incidences were reported, like how they're dealing with things. And I think just that transparency is something that we definitely should be pushing for here in Canada.
Yeah, and it's great to have some of those international examples, right, of how that is working and what we could try and
Yeah.
replicate here. Great. Well, this has been really insightful. I feel like there are some really great takeaways for our audience here. And so I'm going to end on sort of a lighter note. And a question that we like to ask everyone who comes on MediaSmarts Talks is there, because we love media here, what is a piece of media that you've consumed that you're really into right now? It could be something online, it could be, an offline thing, it could be a TV show. Yeah, just
Oh,
anything you'd like to share.
okay. Well, there's two. One, in light of the wonderful Catherine O'Hara's passing, I've been rewatching Schitt's Creek, and that show just makes me laugh. And the other one that I'm really enjoying watching is Heated Rivalry, and I'm enjoying having like lots of conversations about it, discussions about it, seeing all the memes coming up about it. It really seems to be something that's bonded, particularly a lot of women that I know, and so it's been quite fun.
Those are great. Two very big kind of cultural touchstones. So wonderful. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kaitlynn, for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.